Good afternoon and welcome to the Bramble Patch. My name is Wendy and on technicals we've got Alicia today. Thank you for joining us. Today we are going to be making a bit bag. So just for those of you that are not quite sure what a bit bag is, it's a really something really handy. I have several of these. I have one on the arm of my sofa at home, one in my workroom. I've got one that I take outside on the patio when I'm staying outside. And I actually keep one of these in my suitcase because when I'm away, I always sew it whilst I'm on holiday as well. So because of the time of year we've got now, you're all going to be busy making gifts for Christmas presents. And we all know how many threads we get all over the floor and our clothes and everything else. So this will help us keep everything tidy. So the pincushion at the top is actually filled with sand. Obviously we need it something heavy for the weight of it. Also because it's got the sand in, it will sharpen your pins and needles. You could also incorporate iron filings or crushed walnut shells. They're also good for keeping your pins and needles sharp, but you do need the weight, okay? Obviously we've got a really nice little bag here that we can keep adding bits and bobs in. But do be aware, if you have anybody at home with you, you may leave the room if you leave it in the lounge and come home and find the TV controls in it that your husband's put in there. So let's get started and show you how we make it. I've just popped this one on here. There will be kits available for this in the colour that you can see made up and also the colourway that I'm going to be working with. So first of all you actually need are 2 fat quarters to make this. So I've just used 2 different fabrics. You can use whatever you want to. So first of all, for the hinge, you need a 8.5 by 4 inch piece of fabric. And this is going to be folded this way. So if you have an orientation, make sure it's going along the short way so that you've not got any people standing on their heads or anything or lying sideways. Okay, so to make the hinge, all you need to do is fold it over like so and sew down this edge. All these seams I've used are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you've done that, all you will do is actually press that seam open and fold it through. I've got one that I've prepared here already. So as you can see, if I open this up, I've just pressed the seam open to eliminate the bulk, turned it right way through, and when I turned it through, I just put a little pinch in the side to make sure that I got the center seam there, and then just give it a press. So that now can just be set aside. Okay, so that's the hinge, which is this part of the bag here. Next, we're going to move on to make the pincushion. Now, I've actually made it using an inner lining as well. And the only reason I've done that is because it's filled with sand, I want to try and eliminate any seepage. People have asked me in the past, could you actually just put a polythene bag inside? Yes, you could do, but with continual use, that polythene bag would break down. So you're just going to be down to a single layer of fabric. So the outer fabric, both of the pieces of fabric are the same size. They are 8 by 7 inches. Okay. The inner fabric you're not going to see, so you can actually just use any scrap. I've actually used the same because I just happened to have it handy when I was actually making this. So 2 pieces of fabric, 8 by 7. And all we need to do with that is, with your top fabric, lay the other piece of fabric on, I'm just going to move that down, on the inside. This is the piece of fabric that isn't going to show. Along the long edge, so along the 8-inch edge, fold it over 1/2 inch and give it a press. You've actually got one folded inside the other. I'm hoping that you can see what I've done here. So there's one fabric, the other one laid, and I've pressed them both over using a 1/2 inch seam. flip that over, and then on the short side, so here's the fold, you're going to take the hinge that you've already made and pin it in the center of there. Okay, now bear in mind you're going to put a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, so if you measure this and put it exactly in the middle, it actually won't be in the middle once you've taken a 1/4 inch in here. So just bear that in mind when you actually measure it. All you need to do then is take the opposite edge and fold it over to enclose that hinge, so everything is inside. Okay, so we're folding it over like so. So this is where I actually remove this pin, and I'm just going to pop it in here, and I do actually tend to pin this just to make sure I've got everything level and nice and secure, like so. Now, making sure the folded edge that you have here, that these are actually level, because this is going to form the side of the pincushion. So all we need to do now is we're going to sew all the way around here. Now, once I've sewn around once, I actually sew it again, just to try and make sure that everything's closed up, we can't get any seepage of sand whatsoever. So I'm now just going to sew all the way around here and around here, and then I'm going to do it once again, just to make sure it's nice and secure. So I'll just go over to the sewing machine. And I start off at the edge where I've got the fold and put that in. And I tend to come in by about 1/4 inch, start sewing forward and then reverse. That way you've got no pieces of thread exposed on the edge. Slide that one out. And I'm actually sewing through now, and I can feel when it's going through, it's sewing through all the hinge and everything as well. So everything's all lined up. Right the way down to the bottom. I'm just going to pivot and then just sew straight the way up there. And I do go to the end and reverse stitch and come off of it, because we don't want any hole at the end that's not been actually sewn properly. So once I've removed that, I'm actually going to do exactly the same again. So I'm just going to very, very quickly just sew all the way down there, reverse once again, speed my machine up, and here we go. Okay, so what I like to do now is where I've come around this corner, I just want to nip that off, but don't do it too close, because we don't want that corner to be weak at all. We just want to eliminate just that tiny, tiny little bit of bulk. And all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn that through, and now we've already made our pincushion. But I would recommend don't fill it with sand at this point, because you're going to cause problems for yourself. It will make things a lot more difficult. So I'm going to just push this through, like so. I'm just going to get the pair of scissors, and I'm just going to tease those points in the corners, making sure it all squares up nicely, like so. There we go. That's got it. And if you find it's not coming out properly, just take a pin and just tease that final corner out, just so it comes out like so. There we go. And give it a little press. So there is the pincushion and the hinge already made. Now, when we put this into the pincushion, the seam on the back of the hinge will be at the back, so you don't actually see that. That's not exposed at all. So this is the pincushion and this is the hinge. So what we need to do now is we need to make the actual bag itself. So I'm just going to set that to one side. And here we have the body of the bag. Once again, I've actually cut these fabrics both together to make sure everything fits really nicely. The size that you need to cut for the bag is 16 by 9, okay? And when we make it, we will be folding it this way. So if you have an orientation of your fabric again, we need to make sure that it's running the right way. Okay, so I'm just going to set that one aside because I've got one I've already done here. So this is the outer bag, fabric for the bag. And once again, all I've done is I've folded that over and I've pressed it 1/2 inch. So fold it over and pressed it to the wrong side. All I'm going to do now is take this and fold it in half, and I'm going to stitch down here using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, there we go. Trim those threads. There we go. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to actually box the bottom of it. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to actually open this up. I'm not turning it through at all. And I want to press this seam open just to make sure it's going to sit nice and flat. So I'll just open it like so and just run the iron up the seam, pressing it nice and flat. Like so. Now again, I want this seam to be in the back of the bag, so I'm just going to pull it, put a little crease in the top and at the bottom just to make sure I've not got it twisted, and then match that crease up at the top and at the bottom, like so. Now, it's probably a good idea just to pop a couple of pins in to make sure you keep that top edge nice and level, like so. Okay. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew straight along the bottom edge. So I've sewn that across there. I can actually remove these pins down. Okay. So, like I say, if you buy a kit, you get the pattern included in it, and it's going to tell you here that you now need to cut the squares out of the bottom corners. On this occasion, I chose to do a 2-inch square because I found it boxed it nicely, so you can actually get lots of bits of fabric and everything in it. If you do it too skinny, nothing tends to drop to the bottom. So here I have this, and I should have a ruler in here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, put a marker 2 inches here. So you can just draw a line on it, okay? And if I do my measurement here, oops, like so. It's probably easier to use a square ruler, but I haven't got one in the office with me. So we can make this work for us. Now, I personally prefer to cut this with scissors rather than a rotary cutter because of the size of it, because we don't want to overrun and cut into the bag. Two. I'll go up there and around the corner. That's how you make do when you forgot to bring your ruler in with you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to actually cut this out. Nice sharp pair of scissors. And this is the procedure you generally use when you're boxing corners on tote bags, shopping bags, handbags. Very, very simple. Actually, very effective. There we go. So what I like to do now is actually press this bottom seam open because it will make the bag sit nice and flat at the bottom. So you can actually press it with your fingers, with a roller, with an iron. Just scrape your finger across it there, like so. Okay. All I'm going to do now is pull this together, and I've still got the crease line from where it was laying down. So all I need to do now is just stitch straight across this bottom edge and do exactly the same on the opposite side. So here we go. And I'm just going to actually just pull it together and do exactly the same on the opposite side. And then we are ready to move on to the next section. These make really nice presents. So if you belong to a quilting group, you have like-minded friends, and these are really good if you actually attend workshops, classes, you know, as well as actually being used at home. So very practical. Right. So all I'm going to do now is just turn this through. Just push the corners out. And you can now see that this is started to form quite nicely. So what we need to do now is make the lining in exactly the same way. But what I've done, I've already done that in advance because I don't think you really need to see me do that again, and we probably would run out of time if I did. So all I need to do now is actually place this inside. So we're going wrong side to wrong side inside the bag. Like so. Now you have the seams here that you can just get in position so that you know that everything is sitting nicely. So what we need to do now is actually insert the hinge, which we've already got made here. So all you need to do is insert the hinge. Now we want the hinge to come down a minimum of 1 inch, probably a little bit more, because when we sew all the way around it, we want to make sure we catch everything in. So you would find the seam on the back of your hinge and place that a good inch, probably 1.5 inches down, making sure that that seam is sitting on the seam of the inside of the bag. Then once you've got that, you can pop a couple of pins in it. Then you can put the lining over the top of it, okay, and then pin it all the way around, like so. So I've popped this in and I've pinned it all the way around. So what you need to do now is actually sew approximately an inch down, making sure that the stitch line is going over the bottom edge of the hinge, and you can feel it. My hinge is here and this is my sew line. So I've sewn all the way around there. So now what remains to be done is actually for me to sew around the top of it, okay? And to do this, I can take this off and use the machine to try and get it out. My assistant's assisting me. She's been ever so good. Right, okay. So when we start to sew this, I generally sew from this side, okay. But what we need to do, we need to leave an opening of at least 1.5 inches so we can insert the piece of wire or whatever we want to use to actually form the ridge so it actually holds the construction. So I'm just going to literally place the needle in the top edge. Now, when I do this, I like to sew it reasonably close to the top, but not so close that you're actually not going to catch everything in. So I'm just feeding it around, like so. And I'm just pulling the pins out as I sew. Obviously, if you're using contrasting fabrics, you may choose to have a different colour thread in the bobbin to what you have on the top. As long as you've got a good tension, there shouldn't be a problem at all doing that. Okay. So I'm nearly sewn far enough for me to leave this opening. I'm just going to catch that piece in so it doesn't go walkabout. Okay. Where's this? I'm just going to move that around so I can see if I can sew a little bit. Right. Just going to nip that off. She says. There we go. Right. So I'm going to remove the pins, the 2 remaining pins that I had in. And now I have a channel here for me to thread something through to give this a rigid structure. And all I'm using is the tape that you get on the unbelievable deliveries that we order that our husbands don't know about. So this is just off of packaging. You could use boning, you could use wire, gardening wire, anything. And all I'm going to do is just literally push it all the way around. Now, when you do this, do not cut the exact amount. You want it to overlap by probably about 2 inches. When you come round to the area where the hinge is, you'll have to feed it over the top. If I can just show you, I'm just try and get this exposed. There we go. So here's the end that I've already passed through here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to ease that around and I'm going to pass that back into that side and form an overlap. And then that one will pass in there. There's quite a big overlap, so I'll do with trimming some of this off, but because of time, I won't bother. Okay, so as you can see now, we've actually got a nice structure to it and it moves around. I'm hoping Alicia can actually catch that. So there's the bag already formed. So all that you need to do now is just to close up and stitch along that top edge there, okay? So I'll just very, very quickly do that. Just hoping we're okay for time. So I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine and just stitch this very, very quickly. Just lowering my needle into it. And that's the reason I use an inch channel on it, because then the tape or wire will feed through and give you plenty of space to actually do this last piece of top stitching. I have actually in the past also hand stitched that last piece closed, but I found doing it this way is absolutely fine. So that is the bag so far, which I'm hoping you can see. So all that remains now is to actually fill the pincushion with sand. I actually made the little sample that we've got here at the Bramble Patch. I hadn't got a funnel, so I made do and mended. But first of all, what you need to do is start to close up the edge that you had folded over. Okay, so all I've done is a very, very tiny ladder stitch. You can oversew it if you want to. If you wanted to sew part of the way up with the machine, you can, but do make sure you leave your space big enough to actually put a funnel or something in. I haven't got a funnel, but I have actually got a piece of paper that I rolled up and made a little tube. So all remains to be done is to actually feed that in there, like so. And this is where the fun starts, because Alicia is going to hold that for me. And I'm probably going to pour this all over my cutting mat. So don't do it too close to your sewing machine. All right. Okay, so here we go. And it's going in really nicely, isn't it, Alicia? Mm-hmm. How are we doing? Is it getting heavy? Mm-hmm. And give it a wiggle, because it does actually bed down. The fuller you have it, the better. You do have to remember we need to close this. Now, whilst I'm just going to pop my sand down and lift this and just let it feed in. So the sand I'm using is just very fine sand. This is actually from a pet shop. I wouldn't use the sand that's that very strong yellowing colour in case it actually seeps through. So here we go. I'm just going to bend my little container. I'm doing quite well here. I haven't actually spilt any, she says. Famous last words. Oh, I think we still need a little bit more, Alicia. I didn't bend that up right that time. There we go. I think this is going to do it. Oh, look at that. Perfect. And I only spilt a few grains of sand. Oh, spoke too soon. My colleague's laughing at me now. Here we go. Right. I will pass that over to you. Thank you very much. Okay. So that's gone down quite nicely. So all that remains now is to actually just close that last piece, okay? So now I would actually hand stitch that closed using the ladder stitch. What I will say is, please do not take this to your sewing machine to close that last piece up without having hand sewn it. I will not be responsible for you getting sand in the casing of your sewing machine. That's really, really important. It's not hard to sew it up. If you've sewn it using very, very tiny stitches and you choose to sew that closed using your machine, then please do so. But please do not take it to the machine unless you've closed it up properly. So I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in there now. Put them this way. So this is the other colourway of bag that we're actually fabric that we're doing the bag in. And there you go. There is your bit bag, made in a very short space of time, and really, really practical and handy. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please do join us again for some more fun tutorials at the Bramble Patch. Thank you. Bye-bye.